Hello, everyone. I'm Janice Coyle, founder of the New Earth Visioning Project. And our mission here is to promote people and ideas that help bring about what we call a new earth and a new us. Remember that our guest in December was Shelley Ostroff, who has originated the system she calls eco-governance. And this is how that a new way, a formula for a new way of living on the planet, taking care of the planet, to organizing ourselves, and so many other wonderful things. All of these theories and all of these suggestions and all this whole plan is based on how Mother Nature does it. So it's very much a New Earth thing. And she came back, she visited us in December for the purpose of, as you might recall, for the purpose of promoting the 7 days of rest, which we talked a lot about. And now she's going to be coming back. And a recent conversation I had with her, she's the one that brought it up. She said, you were going to call me to say, come back and talk about eco-governance. She reminded me. By the way, she loves our group. She wrote me about what the beautiful energy in this group. And for us, she wants us to watch this introduction, a video she made, Introduction to Eco-Governance, which we're going to watch in a second. And then she's coming back 1 week later. So she'll be back in Tuesday next week, the 28th of March. And she will be with us live. She'll join us because of her timing. She can't come at this time, but she's going to be here with us at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll go ahead and I'll begin the movie that she wanted us to watch. And the reason she wanted us to watch it is so that she can go into a lot of depth with us. She thinks that our group is one that would maybe be helpful in that, in knowing this at a great depth. And she wants to get to know us. And she was very, as I'll say again, she loved our group and she wants to come back. So she's coming back. So let's begin that movie.
Hello, everybody. And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining this presentation. For some of you, it may actually be the fourth presentation or even fifth, and for some people it's new. So just really appreciating the interest and the opportunity to share this work of love. So this presentation is a compilation of some of the key organizing principles of eco-governance, which is a work of many, many years of trying to understand how can we organize differently as a human species for the benefit of all of life. So I'm going to go directly into the presentation, and hopefully we'll have time at the end for discussion. And this is ultimately an invitation into co-creation. This is a co-creative process. Eco-governance is offered as a framework for co-creation. So I'm going to dive right in and let's see what wants to emerge. So this is eco-governance. Eco-governance, love and wisdom in action for the health and vitality of the planet and all its inhabitants. Eco-governance is offered to the world as a framework for a new way of thinking about governance. We're all recognizing that our current systems are fundamentally flawed, that we cannot address the many, many crises we face from within the same systems that created them. And around the world, many new initiatives are emerging, many answers, ancient and evolving answers are surfacing. And our collective challenge right now is to come together and bring these all into coherent action, recognizing that governance is something that we are all part of, and that it's time to reclaim our own individual and collective responsibility as a mature species that can no longer afford to relinquish our authority into the hands of any external authorities, but rather that each and every one of us are accountable and responsible for co-creating the world we live in. And that comes with a lot of grief at what we see around us, and a lot of hope at what is emerging from this, from the challenges through the extraordinary initiatives and actions of so many people around the world, including many of you who are doing so much to change the world. So what is eco-governance? Eco-governance invites us to think about governance from a completely new perspective. It recognizes that our current systems, all of them, are rooted in a mindset of domination and separateness and privilege and exploitation. And that these systems, and let's take a look at democracy as I'm saying this, is very human-centered. It's centered in an understanding of the centrality of human beings, and basically privileges their voice over the voice of all other species and all other aspects of creation over which we have power. So one of the fundamental flaws of our current systems is that human-centeredness. And many others of the flaws are that it creates dependence, it creates reductionism, it separates, it's a win-lose narrative. And as much as we try to tweak democracy, we're still under the illusion that if we just tweak something about the form or we change our leader, everything will become right. And eco-governance invites us to say, well, maybe that's not the case. And we, you know, the forms of governance that we have now have not always been around. They've been created by humans. They can be dismantled by humans. And a new form of governance can be put in place with the right orienting principles. And when we apply our distilled human wisdom to the question of how can we organize in ways as one humanity, as one coherent species for the benefit of all of life. And eco-governance provides some of the organizing principles for that to happen. This particular presentation is a meta overview of some of the key principles. It starts off with a more abstract conceptual, and it goes into the more practical. There's a lot of information covered here, so it may seem a lot to take in, but it really, as I said, is an initial invitation into an ongoing co-creative conversation. And as at the moment, this is, I've been giving presentations on this for about 6 months now. There's a beautiful community beginning to form around eco-governance, and many opportunities for bringing it out into the world. So it's still very much in its pioneering stage. It hasn't been implemented. This is our time to co-pioneer it, co-implement it, co-create it, and see how can it serve to support humanity at this time. So eco-governance invites us to return to essence and reimagine everything about governance, to ask what is essential to life, to shed all the old stories. And one of the old stories that invites us to shed is, where is governance located? So we invite ourselves to ask, or to even imagine, that governance is not located in any external institutions or structure, but it is a whole system function that works through every one of us. If we think of the human body and the regulating system of the human body, or the regulating system of the planet, it's a whole system function that impacts and is impacted by every part of the system. And as such, we are part of that governance system. So this invites us to take up that stewardship role in new ways. And as we shift from an human-centered mindset to an eco-centered mindset, we look at life and return to our own intuitive, instinctual, embodied wisdom and that direct connection to life to learn about the principles of life. And when we do that, we discover that there's much in common. And so eco-governance in many ways unveils that which we already know. It synthesizes a lot of wisdom in the field. It helps us to remember that which is important to us, and offers some common sense principles that inspire us to organize according to a collective compass. So this is about really shifting our allegiance from any external laws or institutions or regulation that have been human-made to universal principles that makes sense and that isn't imposed on us because we have to do it, but rather that expresses something that is deeply embedded in us. It's a code that we already know, and that we can remember. And as we shift our allegiance to these codes, we discover and co-create the processes that can serve our collective well-being. So the organizing question that has propelled eco-governance, it's fueled the inquiry into eco-governance, is how do we organize as a species to exponentially heal the damage and trauma we have caused and ensure a thriving world for all of life in the shortest possible time? So as many of you may know, my background is in whole system healing, and I have worked for years as a therapist, as an organizational consultant, as a leadership consultant, bringing to the field a very eclectic understanding of whole system processes. I did a doctorate in 2000 around whole systems and called it a holistic approach to well-being in organizations, where I was looking at those diverse individual and collective processes, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual individual processes that impact the well-being of an organization. And years later, realized that all of this very holistic approach I'd put together was still very human-centered, especially after I had a very powerful meeting with the White Lions in South Africa, who are stewarded by Linda Tucker. And when I went to the Global White Lion Protection Trust and entered into that extraordinary field that they've created there, I realized that there is something about the vibration of humanity when we are absolutely aligned with and in service of the wisdom of nature. And that has inspired for the last 10 years a deep research into how can we bring all of that human wisdom and expand it to this eco-centered perspective, working in harmony and deeply inspired by nature's principles. So from a whole system healing perspective, I trust that everything that we're seeing on the planet today can be healed much quicker than we may imagine from within the very symptomatic, technocratic, agenda-driven, separatist language that we're using at the moment. So the whole system healing wisdom informs every aspect of eco-governance. It basically says, how would we organize if we brought that whole system healing wisdom to the way in which we engage and work with each other as an interconnected living planet? One of the key offerings that eco-governance shares is a language, as I said, a unifying language. One of the core inquiries I've had is, how do we offer a framework that is so simple, so recognizable, and so unifying that everybody can feel that they are included in it, and that can enable all of the different gifts to come together around a collective compass where nobody leads, but what leads is a vision, what leads is a purpose, what leads is these foundational codes and the tasks that we're all committed to, because we know that ultimately they are what will bring us to the world that we all aspire to. So the vision, that first stage, is offering this unifying vision of one where Mother Earth, humanity, and the entire community of life flourish. And all human beings are supported in realizing their unique potential as wise and compassionate stewards of our planetary home. So this vision then moves a step deeper into, okay, so we have a shared vision, which we can probably, most of us, relate to quite easily. Then how do we define our collective purpose as part of this whole system governance function? And eco-governance asserts that the only legitimate purpose of governance is to protect and cultivate the health and vitality of the planet and all its inhabitants for generations to come. When we articulate a shared purpose, we become accountable to this purpose, and this purpose helps us to orient towards that same organizing principle. And so in the center of this purpose, you will see the health and vitality of the planet and all its inhabitants. Whole system health is at the center of governance, and that language of life is at the center of governance. And the idea for generations to come really helps us to take that long-term whole system view that is part of ancient wisdom. There are indigenous wisdom keepers who have brought forth the importance and have been living with the importance for making decisions for the next 7 generations. And this, in many ways, is how life itself organizes. It always privileges the next generations. And this shifts us from a very self-preoccupied concept of looking at what is immediately in our locality, in our family, in our own supposed interests, to really looking at the long term. And you can imagine how everything would change with this shared purpose. As the central purpose of governance also then becomes the purpose of all the derivative systems, all the derivative social systems, such as economy, law, education, media, technology, and social services. So the first step is really saying, can we agree on this? And if we can't, then what are the consequences of the paradigms within which we're working? So as I said, this puts whole system health at the center of governance. When we commit to whole system health, we look at the consequences of our decisions on the health of the whole. We start to relearn what whole system health is. We shift from a more personal concept of health to a whole system concept of self. We realize that we cannot have health at the expense of any other part of an interconnected whole. There is nowhere in an interconnected living system to export our pollution to, our toxicity to, our aggression to. Whatever we put out there comes right back at us. So whole system health, the concept of health has been very much co-opted by programs, agendas of profit and power at the moment. And we're using very technocratic and very reductionist and very false notions of what creates health. So this is about becoming health literate and recognizing that there is so much wisdom in the field about health and healing that has been sidelined and disparaged, that we need to bring surface and to put at the center of our circle. It's a very holistic approach to whole system health. The information, the wisdom is in the field. And so eco-governance doesn't offer any particular answers, but what it says is these are the principles for surfacing the existing answers from the collective wisdom in ways that serve the whole. So, you know, it is rooted in nature's intelligence system, in indigenous wisdom. It's rooted in the many diverse whole system healing disciplines, but also in the diverse wisdom that each and every one of us holds around what creates healthy living communities, healthy individuals, all the trauma healing wisdom that's in the system. We put that at the center. And how do all disciplines actually reorient to becoming part of this healing process? So we bring all the knowledge and the disciplines back to serving whole system health. How does mathematics and technology and all of these, their primary function is seen as serving life itself? We put water, trees, and the vitality code at the center of eco-governance. Water and trees are these primordial intelligences, consciousnesses, beings that have been in service of life and part of life from the beginning of time. When we learn from water and trees about the architecture and the flow of life, there's so much to learn about how we can integrate these wisdoms, these codes into governance. When we look after water and trees, we look after the whole system, but there are portals to really understanding the interconnectedness of all of life, because we can't really speak about them without speaking about the entire water cycle with the sunlight and the mycelium and the soil and every aspect we can see through these extraordinary consciousnesses that we speak about in the phrases such as water is life and the tree of life. This is not coincidental. And humanity has a direct and a capacity to understand about life through exploring and connecting to water and trees. The vitality code is a code that is at the center of governance. When I ask nature how nature organizes itself in all its exquisite complexity and yet apparent simplicity, the elegance of nature, the way in which everything unfolds so organically in ways that ensure the thriving of all of life. I received a beautiful answer, and it's very intuitive in a way, because you can think about how we are beginning to understand the power of coding through our technology today. But nature also works with codes, and this primary code of nature I refer to as the vitality code, which ensures that all diverse parts of the interconnected whole receive precisely what they need in order to manifest their unique potential in mutual nourishment with the whole. So just imagine that we're all encoded with this primary code. That if you think about the human body, if you think about an ecosystem, you can sense into how each part receives precisely what it needs, not for its own benefit and not in the same language that another part receives, but in service of the whole, in order for it to be able to take up its own unique function in service of the whole. The same as a planetary ecosystem. So nature is encoded this way, and we are part of nature. So this is our fundamental code. Another way I speak about the vitality code is the code that allows us to receive all you need, to give all you can, to become all you are. So we are designed to give much more than we need. And we have a very deep gratification from serving and giving, from being part of a living system that nourishes the whole. And yet our current codes, our current programming actually reflects the inverse of this code. We can imagine how we are actually programmed systematically to live and consume in direct inversion to this. We are programmed to take as much as we can, give back as little as possible, and become a very narrow version of our intrinsic design and potential, life-serving potential. So this is about remembering that code. It's kind of remembering that original code. It's going back to it. It's deprogramming and reprogramming ourselves with this. And we can imagine what an economy would look like if we were to use this code, where all parts of the whole receive exactly what they need to give the value that they can to the whole. How quickly we would create such an abundance in the commons, especially when we work with the core needs rather than the fabricated needs that we are indoctrinated to seek to fulfill. You can imagine what media would look like if we were really enabled the algorithms that allowed us to receive that information that is most nourishing to us, and so on, education, etc. So this code is a code that cultivates a culture of gratitude and generosity and abundance. And then we ask, so if we are to create whole system health, then what are the tasks that we need to be busy with? How do we create whole system health in a world that is very different, is working with a very different algorithm and very different concepts of what governance is?
So the first primary task of eco-governance is to restore right relationship with the foundations of life: earth, water, fire, air, climate, biodiversity, and the web of life. Ultimately, none of us can be healthy when we are contaminating the soil and polluting the water and using fire in ways that go against life, and polluting the air and interfering with the electromagnetic frequencies, when we are undermining the integrity of the climate and decimating biodiversity and ultimately destroying the fabric of the web of life itself. So when we pay attention and when we start to look at how do we restore right relationship with earth and what is the connection between the health of the soil and the health of our own gut, and the health of the water and the health of our own consciousness and our bodies, we start to realize that these foundations of life do not just exist outside of us. They are the very substance of which we are made, and we develop a greater reverence for them, and this shifts fundamentally our behavior towards them. And we also learn from them much about governance itself, because each of these separately, individually, and together hold so much wisdom about how to organize in order to create the conditions for life to flourish. And when we begin to learn about these, we also realize that we need to turn to those ancestral wisdom keepers, the indigenous wisdom keepers, those who have been holding these ancient traditions for millennia intact, and those who have been holding the earth in sacredness, so that we bring them to the center of the circle, and we recognize through this task and many other aspects of eco-governance, the centrality of their voices in how to move forward in integrity with all of life.
The second primary task of eco-governance is to ensure that the core needs of all humans and animals are met through guaranteed access to living soil, healthy water, vitalizing food, fresh, clean air, physical and emotional safety, comfortable shelter, and the conditions needed to manifest our unique potential in mutual nourishment with all of life. So let's take a deeper look at the core needs. And actually, there's an initiative that's being activated now around these core needs, because we can sense into the power of these core needs as a collective platform that we can really get behind and say, what if our collective focus, our collective creativity, were focused on ensuring that all have access to these? So when we look at living soil and healthy water and vitalizing food and fresh, clean air and physical and emotional safety and comfortable shelter, we realize that we can't really have access to these on a personal self-interest basis, because soil doesn't have boundaries, nor does water. And we cannot have these at the expense of neighbors. When there is oppression in the system, when there is privilege in the system, there's going to be disease, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be resistance, there's going to be inflammation. So when we attend to these, all humans, all animals, then we're creating the foundational conditions for all of life to be healthy. And we're actually bringing our attention from these fragmenting tasks that we're busy with, these siloed tasks, to something that benefits all of life. And then there's the core need of manifesting our unique potential. So focusing on the core needs helps us to look at our commonalities, at what we share more than that which divides us, but it also invites us to look at our inherent complementarities and this exquisite language of diversity of nature, because we realize that our potential is very unique and diverse. When we look at what do the bees need, what do the wolves need, what do the earthworms need, what do the lions need, what does this child need, what does that child need? We open up a field of inquiry that is deeply empathic. It's curious about the diversities. It recognizes that we actually need each other to be as different as we can be, because we depend on each other's differences and on each other's gifts. And so it's in our interest actually to ensure that each part has what it needs to express its diverse gifts, because our gifts don't belong to us, they belong to the whole. And we actually depend on them. And this is something that we can see in an ecosystem. So the working with the core needs really has many secondary benefits around creating a culture that really inquires about those conditions and celebrates diversity and community. The third primary task of eco-governance is to ensure the most vitalizing flow of energy and information throughout human society and the biosphere. This task, the most vitalizing flow of energy and information, helps us to look at the language of life, the language of vibration. It helps us to remember that everything is energy, that we shift our attention from primarily looking at outcomes and measurements to also integrating the flow of information, the impact and quality of that flow. And when we're talking about energy and information, we're talking about everything from electricity to money to water to ideas and information and material goods and emotions. We're really looking at that flow of energy throughout. And we realize that our current relationship to energy is very destructive. We're using energy in very destructive, reductionist, and depleting ways. And so this helps us to also restore right relationship and to really learn about the language of energy. And this particular task is also very connected to the vitality code of how do we ensure that the energy flows throughout the system in ways that nourish all parts of the whole, so all parts can receive what they need. And then the fourth primary task of eco-governance is to cultivate the spheres of culture and consciousness. This is more the human aspect of eco-governance. The stories that we tell impact life, impact the way in which we engage in society. So it's important to also pay attention to how our concepts, how our cultures, how our relationships that are influenced by these mindsets impact whole system health. So I'm not going to go into these in depth here, but I'm just going to name them a little bit and just mention a couple of principles around them. So if you think, for instance, about our stories of identity and how they impact whole system health, we can recognize that many of our stories of identity are very divisive, that they pit us against each other, that they focus on aspects that create division and fear and us and them, rather than articulating our identity in more life-enhancing, purposeful, mutually nourishing ways of tribes of belonging around purpose and service that are mutually nourishing. And we can go into a lot of depth around each of these, but just to say, this is also around stories of value. What do we value? How do we create value? What is our concept of value sharing, value creation, value exchange? And how do all of these on the outside impact these on the inside? Communication, everything from technology to interpersonal communication, interpersonal communication, interspecies communication. There's so much to say about all of these. Homemaking, culture, service, relationship, transformation, learning, purpose, governance, consciousness, and whole system health, which is 13th house. Eco-governance is very much about bringing the sacredness back into governance and about cultivating sacred relationship. So it's about healing the relationship and balance of the feminine and masculine principles in sacred stewardship of all of life. You can sense into the way the feminine and masculine principles are already embodied and embedded in the eco-governance mandala. And it's about cultivating a culture of sacred relationship and deep kinship and collaboration with and for all of life. With this principle of offering a languaging that is unifying, eco-governance offers 5 core values that hold within them much of what most of us feel, I think, to be true values. And these are offered as meta values that encourage us to really look at what does it mean and why is this important, and to develop collective inquiry and understanding about what it means to embody these and to find all the other values that are embedded within these. So for instance, wisdom, harmony in diversity, integrity, sacred stewardship, and whole system health. And then the work is, of course, to say, where are we living them? And also to do the very deep shadow work of where are we not embodying these? And not from a place of judgment, from a place of living in integrity, where our words and our actions align and where we develop our self-awareness so that we can live in wisdom. And it offers a language for core actions as well. We can recognize the implications of the current language of bureaucracy and technocracy and profit. And what if we were to frame our core actions in these very intuitive ways of engaging, such as protect, respect, nourish, cultivate, care, share, and value, and create our strategies using these words, but recognizing also that many of these words have been co-opted by, again, the agendas of profit or power, or so we're protecting national flags and all sorts of other interests, but what happens, what does it look like to protect whole system health? What do we need to protect to serve whole system health? And what does that look like to embody it and enact it? Many of you may know Codes for a Healthy Earth. Codes for a Healthy Earth is a framework that was offered to the world about 3 years ago. It's a language with very clear and compelling agreements that synthesize a lot of the common sense wisdom that's in the field in an articulate and unifying way that provides a collective roadmap for citizen-led self-organization. Because as we begin to pull back from these external authorities and begin to self-organize, the usefulness of a roadmap cannot be overestimated. We can hold ourselves accountable to that roadmap that we can all say yes to. So it's very simple common sense principles that are there that include much of what I've said, but also 22 principles like, for instance, if we are going to create whole system health, we actually need to delegitimize all laws that go against life and legitimize only those laws that are in service of life. You know, right now, many of us may be feeling like we're fighting an uphill battle because as we are making inroads in our particular areas and localities and work, there's a whole other process at work which is facilitated by a legal system that has been co-opted by a system of power and profit. So as long as we are following that legal system, we are really splitting our energies and undermining the very purpose that we're working towards. So these kind of principles, in some ways obvious, and yet they're not part of our collective conversation. This was offered to the world about 3 years ago. Jan and I began to articulate these. We sent it to about 100 people from very different backgrounds to get feedback. We integrated the feedback, refined it, shared it with the world. And the response has been to really recognize it as something deeply unifying and also common sense that can be adopted by many as a collective framework for beginning to say, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. Eco-governance is issue-focused. It does not organize from within siloed and reductionist ideas or institutions or ministries, but rather it says we organize around issues, around generative questions that reflect those challenges and opportunities that are present to us in our everyday lives. And no issue is a standalone issue. No issue is just an educational, just an economic issue. So eco-governance works to put generative questions at the center of our field of inquiry and ensure that the diverse perspectives needed to address them are taken into account. The primary issues of eco-governance, the primary generative questions, emerge and derive from the 4 primary tasks. So we ask ourselves, for instance, how do we restore right relationship with the foundations of life? How do we ensure that the core needs of all humans and animals are met? How do we ensure the most vitalizing flow of energy and information throughout human society and the biosphere? How do we cultivate the spheres of culture and consciousness in ways that serve whole system health? Now, we recognize that we don't have to start these questions anew. There are millions and millions of people and organizations around the world who are already answering these questions, leading the incredible solutions to these questions. So it's not about beginning this, it's rather about offering the mandala as a way of mapping our diverse initiatives and programs and our own personal work and initiatives to be able to see it and to create a mapping system that shows the ecosystem of derivative and interdependent issues so that the whole can begin to see the whole around these issues, around these life-enriching issues, and map themselves and collaborate more effectively together, recognizing that these are all interdependent. And by seeing those interdependencies, we can eliminate a lot of the wasteful energy, the redundant energy we are putting in. So eco-governance also offers an issue exploration framework, a very simple issue exploration framework. We put the issue, the question at whatever level of resolution, it needs to be there at the center of the circle. And we say, what are the needs, what are the opportunities, what are the resources, and what are the challenges related to that particular issue? And really looking at the root challenges and the meta solutions that address multiple issues, multiple challenges simultaneously. And then it says, if we're looking at an issue, who needs to be there? Because we're suffering at the moment from very monoculture, reductionist prisms that privilege one perspective over many others. And here we say, let's bring into the circle all the human and non-human stakeholders. The diverse wisdom, human and non-human wisdom, skills, and expertise. The aligned initiatives. The diverse process facilitation techniques, such as sociocracy or pro-social or dynamic governance, or all of those different techniques that we already have available. How can they best facilitate the issue exploration? What are the diverse stewardship roles that need to be taken into account? Those roles that are going to be accompanying the issue further. So it really, central to eco-governance is bringing in the diverse perspectives and recognizing that the wisdom is in the collective, and that those diverse pieces need to be taken into account. Eco-governance offers 4 decision-making criteria for all decisions. It says, what is the most vitalizing, the most efficient, the most impactful, and the most compassionate? So these are very powerful decision-making criteria. And in many ways they overlap, but they also bring in different streams of information. They help us to shift from agreements and disagreements and personal preferences to really looking at the good of the whole, at the whole system health, through these powerful criteria that focus on bringing in the information from the field of those diverse perspectives that can really inform us as to the consequences of these decisions and the diverse choices that we have to make. This is about shifting from voting and rating to information-based decision-making. It creates a culture of consultation, because when we're all dedicated to figuring this out, this isn't about, perfection at this point. It's not about saying, okay, we have to have all the information necessary, but just by asking these questions and who needs to be present to give information about this, we are already shifting our attention and nudging the system into much more informed decision-making. And so the tools, the culture, these questions, all of this helps to nudge us into ensuring that with this consultative stance, we are more likely to get the best information to every decision-making point. And this is a spiral of decision-making. It's really saying, there is no final point in this. We keep honoring information as it comes in and seeing how to constantly improve ourselves with that information. We can have certain consensus, and that can help us go forward in some areas. We can open up new questions and say, how do we define this as issues, and then create new spirals of discernment. Eco-governance is very much based on community-led self-organization. It encourages and supports communities in doing what they know how to do best, in passion-oriented, purpose-oriented, expertise-based communities that form through their own initiative, and works to say, how do we support them in doing what they know how to do best, but also connecting and creating mycelium-like networks of vitalizing information exchange between them. As you can see, eco-governance offers organizing principles that can be adopted on the most personal level to the global level. It's not about prescription. It's not prescriptive. It doesn't have any authority other than really the authority of its integrity and its usefulness. So it will be adopted to the extent that it's valuable, that people see it, and that they're willing to run with it and co-develop it. It also focuses, while it offers principles on all of these, it also very much focuses on localization and bioregionalism as very important whole system solutions, that as we begin to nourish vibrant, vital local communities who can have their needs met at the local level, we are supporting the use of energy in its most accurate way. We bring our attention, our care, our creativity back to where it is most efficient and most vitalizing. We develop communities of care. These communities really form around caring about each other, caring about the land, caring about the biodiversity there. And there are diverse, incredible initiatives that are already very much in the field. The localization movement, transition towns, eco-villages, permaculture, so many initiatives in the field that are working to make this happen and to support new communities forming with incredible resources. And you can imagine, as we come back to meeting our needs at the local level and disconnect from the dependence on these external structures and authorities, we also can use the vitality code there to say, how does this particular community receive exactly what it needs to become all it is and give all it can, and in this mycelium-like, interconnected, mutually nourishing, thriving local communities. Eco-governance offers this very simple way of organizing. It talks about action circles, service circles, and advisory circles. Action circles are circles that and all of these circles, again, self-organize, and it's not about starting them, it's about mapping those existing ones according to the mandala, and they can organize in whatever way feels most beneficial for them. The criteria is the value that they give to the whole. So the action circles are those that are implementing the tasks of eco-governance. The advisory circles, there are 4 kinds of advisory circles: guardian circles, expertise circles, synergy circles, and issue-focused circles. The guardian circles are those that really look after those who don't have, give voice to those who do not have a human voice, or those population groups that are not able to speak for themselves at any given moment. The expertise circles are those that bring in their areas of expertise and ensure that their areas of expertise are being well used in service of the health of the whole. The issue-focused circles are those that bring in their experience working with issues. And the synergy circles are those that work to ensure the best synergy and cooperation and collaboration among all parts of the whole. And then there's the service circles, who offer diverse services to the whole. Can be research or videography or healing, whatever it is. You can see that the circles are very much embedded in the communities that they serve. So as opposed to those anonymous external institutions, this creates a sense of deep connectivity. We are all ultimately part of these diverse circles. We take roles in different circles. And so the community makes up the circles, and the circles serve the community. And the role of eco-governance is to support the evolution of the templates, the protocols, the processes for ensuring the most vitalizing flow of energy and information, the best feedback loops, the best ways of organizing for mutual accountability among the circles and the community. So this, as I said, is very much about supporting individual engagement in the world that we co-create. Individuals from an early age can be encouraged and will be part of these different kinds of circles. They can initiate circles, join circles, contribute or observe in different ways. And then there's generative circles, which is spaces for new ideas to emerge. They've less formalized circles, but circles from which those other stewardship circles can be birthed according to need. And community hubs, again, this is a very important part of eco-governance, is to support community and supporting community. So there are extraordinary initiatives around repurposing malls and warehouses and creating spaces with permaculture where the community can really come and share and learn and nourish each other. And this also can happen on the virtual level. This is just a reflection of some of the things I've already mentioned, so I won't go into that right now. Eve is, I call it an evolving virtual ecosphere. It's a vision for a very evolved global community platform that will integrate much of the technologies that we use today, but all aligned with the principles of eco-governance. So it'll have its own marketplace and social media, and it'll support the circles informing and project management tools. And the idea is that as the community invests in the community, more and more of these technologies will come in to create a very vibrant, coherent community that is working in alignment for the good of the whole. Eco-governance suggests that rather than thinking about siloed central organizational concepts like ministries, that these are the self-organizing circles, and that they work according to what we call whole system social functions. Whole system social functions reinforces the fact that all of these functions that we're dealing with are whole system functions. They're not siloed. They work in a lot of interdependence with each other. You can't isolate education and learning from governance. You can't isolate health and healing from agriculture, food, and water. But on the other hand, these are areas of expertise and stewardship that need also their own framework, theoretical, conceptual spaces to evolve in relationship with others. So these are this is naming kind of information management system. So these are the names of the social functions. It's inspired by Barbara Marx Hubbard, but quite different from her in different ways. So I'll just name them, or some of them: peace, safety, and harmony in diversity; value creation, sharing, and exchange; communication and media; habitat, transport, and infrastructure; science, energy, and technology; health and healing; culture and consciousness; agriculture, food and water; learning and education; governance, law and justice; climate, environment, and the community of life; cosmos and extraterrestrial or interdimensional relationships; and whole system health. So the idea is that this is a very holonic perspective. We can't look at any of these as separate from the others. If we put learning and education, for instance, in the middle, then all of the others are on the outside, and we would necessarily have them in the background. So we can't, this just shows what is the key prism that we're looking through. And each of these is a hierarchy in itself. In other words, we can go into deeper and deeper layers of resolution and say, if we were, for instance, put learning and education in and say, well, what would the 12 around the one be? The 12 around the one is a very archetypal way of organizing information. So at different levels of resolution, this can be used as a community template for filling these in terms of what are the holons within this? What are the parts of this particular hierarchy that we would be interested in putting here, for instance, teachers training, or ancient wisdom, or the diverse intelligences. And this is not prescriptive. Again, it emerges from the collective wisdom. So where do we begin? Eco-governance is really a framework for whole system simultaneous evolution. It's not about starting in any one place. It's about offering codes that permeate all parts of the system simultaneously, and in that sense, cultivate that whole system adoption and evolution by these codes being integrated by those who are already aligned with them and working to that first. So, for instance, it's about transforming the whole system: law, media, education, economy, food, water, energy, infrastructure. Many people are already leading the way in bringing these more into alignment with some of the principles of eco-governance. And so it's about working with those who are leading that and bringing them into coherence as well, and then seeing what eco-governance can offer as additional codes and ideas and information to support that whole working as a whole. So one of as I said, it's very much about amplifying what already works in the system. So it's about showcasing what is already there. This isn't about starting anew. It's about starting from where the system is at, particularly by amplifying what is already aligned with it. And then there's one law that changes everything. So I'm almost at the end of the presentation, but this feels an important piece to bring in. This one law that changes everything, it came from a vision that I had a few years ago where I saw water really unifying humanity and activating a global citizen-led movement where people around the world were uniting for the protection of all waters everywhere. And I saw how water is the medicine of our time. And that prompted what later became a proposal for a world water law. That the idea is that we cannot change the system law by law or country by country or leader by leader. We don't have the time, and the system is built against that kind of essential change that is necessary to realign us with whole system health and the natural laws and the original laws of nature. But if we can create this global movement around one thing that we can all agree on, I would suggest that water offers such an orienting principle. So the proposal for a world water law requires the uncompromising protection and restoration of all natural water sources, watersheds, aquifers, rivers, lakes, wetlands, estuaries, and oceans. Today, we're seeing people struggling to organize rights of nature for this river and that river. And this says we need to look at the whole system, and we need this to do it simultaneously and immediately. So if we rise together and call for this one law as one unified voice, one treaty, one global agreement that precedes and supersedes all other laws, then we are activating that whole system transformation in all areas of society. The second principle is the rewilding of ecosystems necessary for the restoration of the planetary water cycle. Seems obvious, but yes, of course, that is an essential, uncompromising step that we need to take as one organized humanity at this point. The guaranteed free access of all humans and animals to natural, uncontaminated water. This is about releasing concepts of safe water and really working with pure, natural, uncontaminated water. There's lots to say about that as well. And finally, all governments, corporations, communities, and individuals are held fully accountable for their impact on all waters everywhere. When we put accountability into the system, which feels, again, like the most common sense thing to do, because who gave anybody the right to contaminate, own, control any water source? That is not the law of water. But when it happens because our systems don't hold anybody accountable. But as soon as we put accountability across the board into the system, we are already activating a huge shift in mindset and a huge shift in how we organize ourselves. So this proposal for a water law also gives us a sense of how eco-governance works. It's out of the box. It really questions everything about how we are thinking about things right now. And it invites us also to think, well, maybe we don't need so many laws, and maybe those who are making laws are not the ones that need to be making them. And maybe we actually need some root laws, like a land law, like a tree law, like other laws that really help us put the foundations in place that immediately build the peaceful, harmonious community cultures that will self-organize when our foundational needs are met. And so right now what we're doing is we're creating a web of integrity. We're working with those who, we're sharing this with those who are naturally aligned with this and inviting them into the co-creative field to build a web of integrity that gets this and that can really bring our resources together to say, what are the different gifts that we're all holding that can support this in being activated at a larger scale. Some of the pieces that are already in place is we've got an eco-governance community that you're very welcome to join, especially now that you've heard the presentation. This is where we'll be self-organizing, and you're invited to go to ecogovernance.earth. Thank you for being present in such a nourishing way, and just for your interest in eco-governance and for your willingness to become part of the community and participate and see what we can create together. I'm looking forward to continuing in so many different ways.
Isn't she incredibly intelligent and educated and everything? You'd be surprised at how humble she is. I once, in a conversation I had with her prior to her previous visit to us in December, on December 6th, I think. I asked her, where did you get all this? I looked through the website and the descriptions of it. Where does this come from? She said, that's exactly right. You got it. It came from, not just me, it came from everywhere. So it was like, is it channeled? She said, no, it was guided. And it was guided. Yes, I have education, but most of it came from the trees, from the waters, from the spirit of the animals, from all of this. And when I meditate, it comes, and it seems to come from an energy that feels like trees, or the sky, or something like that. And she's very modest. Oh no, this doesn't come from me. And she's one of the most graciously humble people I've ever met, and just a real dear, beautiful presence, and gentle and kind and all that. So I really admire her. She's going to be with us in person next week, next Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, for her to accommodate her timing. If she came at 7, it would be like 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning for her. So I hope you come and visit and see her in person next Tuesday. And I have a lot of questions for her, and you probably do too by now. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Love you. Bye-bye.